Thank you very much for speaking to the inaugural Leaders of Change Forum this morning. Fantastic presentation, fascinating presentation. I wondered if you would be so kind as to share with us your thoughts on some of the implications of the change that we're seeing happening around the, triggered by the internet, the social and technological shifts that are happening in our world triggered by the internet.
Okay, I would call the age of the internet the third age of strangers. So when we were on the African savannah, we couldn't get by in groups of more than about 150 at a time, and there were the two most important pronouns were us and them. And if you saw people who were them, you were suspicious of them, you might have to have a war with them, and you were competitors with them. The second, and so strangers were enemies. And over a long and bloody and miserable period, well, and also a great period, we learned to live in cities in which strangers are not necessarily to be feared, but they're amongst us, and we say good day to them and all those kinds of things. And then, but there are still, that us and them business is still important, and we go to war on behalf of our city or our nation and so on. And the third age of strangers is where the city is, well, this is the cliche of the global village, but the city is the planet, and we can take an interest in something that someone is saying or doing, and we can shoot them an email, or we can participate on their blog, or follow them on Twitter or Facebook and so on. And that's a remarkable thing. It's remarkable because it enables us to have very conversations amongst peers who know a great deal about some particular thing that's very important. It's remarkable because someone in this world, you can see talent in this world way over the horizon. It's one of the reasons why when I was chairing the Government 2.0 Task Force, I was arguing that public servants should be able to blog and all this sort of stuff, and still that really hasn't happened, and the default is still silence. But I wasn't really inviting public servants to go out and make lots of politically controversial statements at all. I was inviting them to say, you know, here we are in the department at the moment, where we're in the Department of Childhood, of Childhood Development or whatever it is, and we're looking at playground safety. And here's a blog that we've started up on this, and there's some interesting research from Manitoba in Canada about this, and so on. Now, that is something which can be hugely productive, but the other thing about it is that you can see people who are really, really good. They can be quite junior, but they're really, really good, and that's got big implications for the efficiency of the public service. You can see someone who's good, you can recruit them, and you can fast track them, and all that sort of stuff. That's how Silicon Valley works. That's how the private sector is starting to work. So there's lots more to it. It's just like this, you know. You could explain something simply about why don't we get off the African savannah and start living in cities. You could say, well, you know, you can get your bread and your milk and your vegetables delivered in a truck, but it's much more than that.
And so, from a social, the impact on society at a pragmatic level, when we think about the policy and service delivery work that our government does in the delivery of public goods, the gap between the wealthy and the poor.
Yeah.
If you look at it at a macro level and look out at the planet, the gap's actually closing, because the developing nations are managing to transcend trade barriers and boundaries.
Except at the top, where the gap's still widening, and the rich are getting richer, but the poor are getting richer.
But at a global level, at a micro level, within each country, the gap is still increasing. So in the United States, the top 0.1%, 16,000 families, 10 years ago owned 1% of the national wealth, now own 5% of the national wealth. So from a public sector perspective, delivering the social good that we want in our society to bridge that gap, are there some lessons for us that people could practically take from a public sector leadership perspective?
Look, I don't know. I think that the message, I mean, I'm a really big fan of the internet, but I don't have the view that it will necessarily... Well, and it delivers a certain kind of equality pretty well, which is a meritocratic quality. So we can use the internet in lots of ways that I've talked about to promote the really talented faster, and that makes the world a bit more equal, but only temporarily. A meritocracy, the stricter a meritocracy is, it's likely the more unequal it will become. So that's an ongoing problem. The other thing is that inequality has typically been underpinned by the amount of money that's been going to people, but I think it will more and more reflect the amount that they participate. And so we hear about the digital divide, and we think about, do people have broadband to their door and so on, and that's kind of important. But there will be a large class of people who will have broadband to their door, and they'll really prefer to sit on the couch and crack the tinnies and watch the rugby union. I think is your favourite thing, although I'm sure you wouldn't be doing that. You'd be maybe at the game. So if we're concerned about the digital divide in that sense, there's also what I call the participation partition. And the participators, the world will be handed to the participators, and it will be more and more the sort of consumers who don't really do anything will find themselves not very well included in society.
So is there a logical extension of that for the public sector, gaining participation will be an important thing?
Yes, I think that's true. And I think that the public are pretty suspicious of the public sector, because the public sector consults its head off, but consulting is, there is a very strong sense of cynicism in the public that, yes, we're being consulted, but we don't really have a say. And in fact, in a sense, that's necessarily so, because, there are 22 odd million people here, and they can't all have a say, or what they say can't all have an effect. But it's worse than that, because most consultancy processes, citizens don't really believe that the best ideas will get up. And that's a big challenge, to try to be a little more for real about consultation and actually getting people involved. It's a difficult thing that the public sector has. You could say it's done it better than the private sector in that it's always got this mandate to consult, but it's managed to produce all sorts of ways of doing it, which are kind of Clayton's methods of consultation.
So for the consultation to be relevant and respectful and rewarding to the participants, then there is the opportunity with the internet to have the participants define the consultation.
Absolutely. Well, that's right.
Self-directed.
And I always think of these things. It's actually a very unfashionable word, except in sport. But I always think of these things as actually trying to cultivate an elite. If you're trying to work out what to do with freeway policy, where to put a freeway, and you want to consult to people, you will get an awful lot of dross. Someone will say, well, look, build the freeway, but don't build it near me. We know that. But there will be knowledge and information in the community, and the part of the task of the consultation is to find it out. And often that can be done. Often the community will find it out. If you create this space, leaders emerge, and they emerge from surprising places. Our model of consultation is more, we'll ask the people, and this is kind of very democratic, and that doesn't work terribly well, because the people, who are the people won't give you one answer, they'll give you lots of different answers. So you've got two problems: an intelligence problem, which is working out who's got the most important and worthwhile things to say, and then a governance problem, which is then saying, rightio, we have consulted, we've had 1,000 ideas, and we're going to go with these 3. And the rest of you, we did listen, we tried to take the ideas on their merits, we're still going with these 3.
So there are those challenges. There are also benefits, some of which might be economic and other. So an illustration would be DEWA have got a program that they have funded to help carers of school-age students who are on the autism spectrum.
Right.
And so the teachers will often get a new pupil who is on the autism spectrum, and they're not well prepared or weren't well prepared to integrate that person into their classroom. Ditto the families and other caregivers. And so DEWA funded a program that was delivered through a not-for-profit with subject matter expertise, and it built a community, an online community, sharing the best practices, and the online community then became self-sustaining, and the funding and promotion of the initiative stopped 6 months ago.
And it's still going.
And the 35,000...
I'd love you to send me the details on it.
The 35,000 member community is growing 1,000 a month with no promotion.
And then there's all around the world.
Yes, and there's people, oddly enough, they've got people from Singapore saying, we don't have one of these, can we join yours?
Exactly.
Which is...
which is the global public good side of things, and illustrates how much learning can take place because of the internet. It's a fantastic story and a fantastic time to be alive, basically.
So then the benefits, the upsides, looking past the challenges, the economic impact of having a community of champions self-sustain, self-select to an extent and self-sustain. There must be some benefits from a pragmatic point of view for the public sector to be able to have the power and leverage of giving that back to...
But large organisations find this very hard. Notice I say large organisations rather than the government. You know, I've been involved with large multinationals who've asked me to, you know, help them with their innovation plan and all that sort of stuff, and it just looks awfully like the innovation plan of some department. It's full of policy, and it hasn't made contact with actual innovators and said, what can we do to help you? What can we do to make your life, making our company better, easier? What can we learn? It's none of that. It's all the senior managers saying, where do we want to be in 10 years' time? Here are the new plans, and handing them out. Command
and control is still the rather... It requires a leap of faith, presumably, in the breaking of a comfort barrier to be able to move from that command and control thing to say we will give the stakeholders...
Well, but the thing is, it's not so easy. It's easy to say give up control, and you should, but... You know, I compare 2 times when people gave up control or got control wrested from them. 1648-9, when they chopped the king, they got rid of the king, and it was total chaos. And then 1688, not much longer, so that's 40 years later, and they said to the king, "Guess what, pal? You've just become a constitutional monarch. You are now subject to the law of the land." And Britain never looked back. So it isn't just a matter of giving up control, it's actually building the institutions and building the culture and the capabilities so that when you relinquish control, there's actually stuff underneath it that can travel and do things. So it's a much harder business than just saying relax and give up control. And if you want to go and say to all the underlings, all the people in an organisation, you do it, well, that's an incoherent command. Who? So you sort of have to cultivate a community which can then say, oh, that guy's got a good idea, we should really be backing him.
And the internet is the internet is the delivery vehicle for the underlying
that's right. It's just a piece of hardware. That's right. Like the language we're speaking now, it's just a tool, and it's an incredibly powerful tool.
So we give control that's enabled by the internet, and we use the internet to establish the new mechanisms for guiding, or the new mechanisms for control, a different form of control or a different degree of control.
Well, it's always a sort of an alchemical ecology, but I think that's a mixture of metaphors between top down and bottom up. It's not just a matter of coming along and saying, oh, we've got this great idea, let's all be hippies, you know.
Nicholas, on that note, thank you very, very much for your time and your provocative and challenging and thought-inspiring information that you shared with us and thoughts you shared with us. Very much appreciated, and much appreciated by the audience. Thank you.
Thank you.